Hello friends, and welcome back to Player's Companion. I'm Haley.
And I'm Dustin.
And today we are going to be talking to you about the role-playing world of Rokugan and Legend of the Five Rings.
So what inspired us to speak about it today is this new book from Edge Studios and Asmodee Entertainment, Adventures in Rokugan. Those of you who are familiar with Dungeons & Dragons know that there are different settings that you can play in the world. Most of the adventures take place in the Forgotten Realms, but sometimes you can be in other areas like Spelljammer, recent release taking you to space. Other adventures have gone to the planes of the Nine Hells, or have played through Dark Sun and older editions. There's lots of different worlds and dimensions that you can play in. Likewise, Adventures in Rokugan is its own new setting, where you play a Dungeons & Dragons compatible adventure, but in the land of Rokugan.
So Rokugan comes from the role-playing game Legend of the Five Rings. It was originally a card game, right?
Correct.
But then it became its own role-playing world. It's based on feudal Japan, but there's a lot of Asian mythological influences kind of combined into the world. The lands are separated by clans, and then to the very south, there's a wall, and that's kind of where all the fantasy is held. There's this dark force on the other side of the wall known as the Shadowlands, where all the demons and evil creatures lurk. And that wall is protected by one of the greater clans of Rokugan known as the Crab. There's several other great clans as well that all have their own specific functions. You have the Phoenix, who are masters of magic, the Lion Clan, who are known for their war tactics, the Scorpion, known for subterfuge. They're kind of the evil characters, maybe. There's a lot of political intrigue between the clans as they try to gain influence or trying to gain favor with the Emperor. In general, Rokugan offers an Asian fantasy-inspired backdrop to a grittier kind of feel that would take inspiration from classic samurai films like Kurosawa.
So as Haley mentioned before, Rokugan was pulled from Legend of the Five Rings, which is a game which has been going for well over 20 years now. It has taken the form of a card game, another role-playing game, books and board games, all kinds of media, though it's still not known to a huge number of players. Now, this is really a chance for a new audience, a wide audience, to come and experience this. Given the popularity of Dungeons & Dragons 5e and how it's kind of swept over the role-playing landscape, what this offers is a handful of new classes, such as the Bushi, which is the traditional samurai warrior, duelists, magic users in the form of Shugenja, shinobi, and a handful of new Japanese mystical-inspired races. While the original game is much more political in its setting, it has a lot of intrigue, backstabbing, and vying for powers in political courts between the families. Adventures Rokugan is meant to, as D&D is, be a little more combat heavy. However, the intrigue can certainly still be inserted by a clever GM. Players are definitely encouraged to get very heavy into the setting and infuse their characters with a lot of life and still get involved in the politics. They just don't have as many roles to make for the politics, as most of the roles are still, of course, with D&D, very combat oriented. But it doesn't mean you can't still write the intrigue into the story. Now, I personally have been very familiar with the world of Rokugan for a long time. Some friends back in my hometown in Kansas taught me to play the card game back in the day and got me into the role-playing game as well. And I've played that across all of the various editions. There have been 5 editions of the main original role-playing game using its roll and keep system. And this is actually the second foray the game has had into the Dungeons & Dragons world. The other one wasn't very successful during the 3rd edition. He was a little newer, having been brought in as a player when the 5th Roll and Keep edition came out. So, as a player, what do you feel about Rokugan? How have you felt being in the setting?
So, Legend of the Five Rings is actually my favorite role-playing game. As much as I like Dungeons & Dragons, I feel like there's 2 types of role players. It's either you want to be really heavy into combat or you want to be really heavy into role-playing. I like combat, but I lean way more towards wanting to role-play. And that's really what you get out of L5R.
In past editions, especially with the card game, people were very particular about the clans they played and gained a lot of loyalty to different factions that are in the game now. You never played the competitive card game to get into that.
You don't need to get into the card game.
Right, I was going to ask if you like what you felt about like the clan loyalty aspect of it. Do you still feel that?
Yeah, like I would get mad at other players for dishonoring like my character's clan, and it didn't even like I wasn't really like role playing. Like that was me getting mad about it because I felt like so loyal to this clan, which was the Crab Clan, who protect the wall. Dustin's got a shirt. But yeah, I didn't need to play the card game to feel loyalty to my clan. And part of that is, in this roll and keep, they spell out 20 questions for you. Some of them as simple as like, what clan are you? What is your basically class? But then it starts to get more in depth about like quirks that your character has. It really creates a very robust character before you even start. I recommend even people playing D&D modify this 20 questions for their own characters, especially when you're new, because it really helps you know who your character is before you even start, instead of like trying to kind of figure it out along the way.
That's not really in Adventures in Rokugan, but the setting is the same. Its depth, its politics, the years of fiction and writing that are the foundation of this game still exist online and can be used to flavor and develop the world of Rokugan with incredible depth. It is also my favorite RPG setting to play in, and I really urge anyone who's running this game to give the added lore a look and see there's ways to add depth to the experience for your players. And players, get into the setting, get into the role playing, let yourself become a part of the world. You'll never have more memorable games than you will in Rokugan.
And there's no reason not to go online and look up the 20 questions. You can easily find it and still apply it to your character if you're playing this 5th edition compatible version. I think it'd be very beneficial for building your character.
So that aside, it's not from us gushing over the setting. Just real quick, wanted to get into mechanically what you'll find in this adventure that sets it apart from other D&D inspired settings. This one does add a lot of kind of mechanical differences that set it apart from normal Dungeons & Dragons. In this version, there are different races, and the races still feel, while distinct, they play similarly and build similarly to the other races that are in D&D. It's really the classes and the backgrounds where it differentiates itself. So in this one, each of the classes has its own unique mechanic to play with. Now, while this adds some cool other things in here, again, the spells, there's kata, there's stances. When you do your melee strikes, you can do them against one target or several, which is something that's not really available in normal D&D. So a lot of cool new things to play with. It does make it a more complicated game in some ways, because it's not just a setting plastered onto the normal D&D rules. There are some new rules in this to learn. So I wouldn't say it's good for a first-time player or someone just looking to jump into D&D and, hey, they like samurai, let's get into this. Might be a little daunting, but if you've already played some Dungeons & Dragons, you're familiar with the D20 system, you want to try something new, this one's definitely for you. One last thing, as far as like who this target audience is, obviously, if you're familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, like I said, if you want a new setting, definitely get it. And maybe, if you like it a lot, graduate over into the roll and keep system for the full political intrigue version. For older players, you're going to find some changes in this book as far as the setting goes. Some things that were taken from Japanese culture are not to be found in this version of the book. This is a gateway to get new players who wouldn't normally look at a different system to try out and see and fall in love with Rokugan, and maybe find their way over into the full game, the original game, or the lore, or other RPGs and board games, and maybe bring L5R back into the spotlight. It used to be pretty big. It's fallen by the wayside, but it's primed for a return.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't already done so, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, ring the bell, leave a comment. Let us know if you're going to play, what you're interested in the most with this system and how it's going to incorporate into D&D. I think it's going to be really interesting to compare D&D, L5R, and then this version and how it kind of mixes the two. I'm really curious to see how it'll do that.
And once you give a look at it and have decided which clan you're going to play, let us know. We'll see
Yes.
what kind of mix of Rokugani we have down in the comments section.
All crabs.
So thanks for joining us once again, and we'll see you next time.